Welcome to Tiffany Turned On. I'm your host, Tiffany Anton. I'm a psychotherapist specializing in sex and relationships, hoping to help you discover current topics in a fun, sometimes serious, and educational manner. I hope to help you get turned on in life as well as inside of your bedroom. Welcome back to part 3 of SOGIE, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity Expression. I'm hanging out with Autumn, which I have a ton of fun doing. And if you are just listening right now, there are so many things that you missed out on. What are you? Are you demi, sapial, bi, straight? What are these current labels and how are they applicable to you and what's happening with our society? We also discuss therapy, drug use, hormones, cross-dressing, and pegging. If you're curious about the journey, please listen to Autumn in a vulnerable way share theirs.
Started taking the estrogen or estradiol.
Did you start on spironolactone, which helps to kind of eat up the testosterone?
A lot of trans people who are AMAB do have to take Spiro or another alternative, but my testosterone was not even high enough that I needed Spiro. I've never needed Spiro once I started estradiol.
Yeah, so you don't even have enough testosterone for the spironolactone to kind of eat up.
Correct. Yeah, in my labs now, it's always still very low without it. That has never really been a thing.
Did you try anything else other than the estradiol?
So no, at this point, I started on pills, and we started on 3 2-milligram pills a day, and then the lab work showed that wasn't quite the right mix we were going for. 2 was working out, and we supplemented that with a PAT, and that was a good mix for quite some time.
Let me ask, the doctor that said, let's supplement you with testosterone, and you're like, you know what, I want some of these hormones that align with who I am. Was that a general practitioner? Was that an endocrinologist? Was that a trans specialist?
That was a general practitioner. That was not who I saw for my hormones.
What made you go from your GP to another doctor, and what was their specialty?
When I really started exploring my gender, I connected with a group at Affirmations out of Ferndale, which is an in Michigan, and this is a LGBTQIA plus recreation center, community center. They have a support group called Trans Life Support, and this is primarily for newer trans people. Got into that group. When I shared my story, it was like I was immediately accepted.
I was thinking about the first step, the courage that you had to have at that time to, all right, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing this shit. I'm being me.
Having been in Narcotics Anonymous for a while, I think that really helped with the amount of meetings I was going to and having that comfort with like those meetings, getting vulnerable in those meetings and really sharing my feelings and thoughts.
And were those co-ed NA meetings?
They were. Coming into this space, my first meeting, I just laid it all out, totally bare and vulnerable.
I want to interrupt, and you just used the language, laid it all out there, and oh my God, you're laying it all out there right now, and that is so much vulnerability, and I want to give you a huge thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Because it's very vulnerable to do this, and that also just says, you know what, damn it, I am good. I am good in this body, this sense of self, sexual expression. That I interrupted, but
No, you're good. I mean, it's a testament to the journey that I have been through.
A hell of a journey.
Because this was quite a process to where I am today. But yeah, so I had learned about doctors in the area from this group. And where we are in Southeast Michigan, we're very lucky to have the doctors we do in the area. There are some leaders in the trans medicine community. So I started going to one of those and talked about what I was trying to, how I was feeling, and then just asked me, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve then? We created a plan that was specific to me.
What did you say? They asked you, what are you trying to achieve?
And so I said, so I'm non-binary. I'm not trying to completely transition. I am just trying to feel more myself in my body. Want to start hormones. Well, at the time I said, I want to try hormones, see how this feels. feels and see how that works for me, and then revisit it in a
Did
little
your
while.
insurance cover this doctor or the hormones?
At this point, this doctor did not take my insurance. Thankfully, this doctor had a very reasonable self-pay, and then the medication was actually covered by my insurance. So that was a blessing too. I did pay out of pocket to see this doctor, and then I had my primary care doctor in the meantime that I would see in between visits with this doctor.
Did you receive any judgment from your general practitioner or primary doctor?
The one I had at the time, when I had decided to go the other way, away from the testosterone, I left that doctor.
I left that doctor because
I didn't feel safe in pursuing this within that environment, that person.
within the medical practice and with that particular physician.
Correct.
Was
Yes.
that, like, would you have guesstimated that was a cisgendered male?
Yes. And I just wasn't loving him as my doctor in the first place. I think that relationship had run its course and I needed something new anyway. So it was just time. I really sought out doctors and I called around and interviewed some doctors and said,
Nice.
like, these are the things about me, like, you kind of need to know. How do you feel about that? You know, if there was any hesitation there, if there was any, like, you know,
So
not.
was it medical? Because you're going to get the secretary. You
Yes.
might get a nurse.
Yes. So I said those things to the secretary and also asked the secretary, like, how do you feel your office is with, you know, LGBTQ people? Also asked to speak to the doctor. Some I was able to, some I had to actually go into the first appointment to ask all those questions of the doctor themselves.
When I got my mammogram last year, I was so excited because it asked gender identity on the form.
Yes.
It did not make the assumption because you have stereotypical female style breast, didn't make you assigned female at birth. Or if you have these breasts, that you may feel very non-binary. I was excited to see that on the forms.
It's awesome to see what progress has been made within medical forms. Some places still aren't great, but that is an awesome thing. And funny you mentioned mammograms.
Yes, I ask you, do you have to get your tits squeezed?
So I do. Yes.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
And
But-
you do not have implants, so the breasts that you
Correct.
have are fully from the estrogen. Yeah, and they look
Yeah.
pretty good.
I grew them myself.
You grew them yourself. That was a nice garden.
Yeah.
Have you had the mammogram yet, or you know that
Oh,
you
yes.
need? You
so
have?
interestingly enough, before I even started taking hormones, the doctor had felt a lump in my breast tissue. So I had to go get a mammogram.
Well, there are
As
male
a,
assigned
you know,
to birth,
male.
cis
Yeah.
male. There is breast cancer in that
Yes.
population.
And so I did go for a mammogram. They diagnosed it as gynecomastia, or breast growth in males. It turned out my breasts were actually growing
Before the
without
hormones?
even taking hormones. There it shows you how low my testosterone was in the first place, and that was
When
a real turning.
I think those testicles get smaller.
That hasn't been my experience.
No, so your
but-
low testosterone didn't affect your testicles and the size.
No, not the testicles.
And what about your biological penis? What word would I use for that?
So I like to use genitals, personally.
Genitals?
That's the word
Okay.
I like.
And if I
Um,
said to you penis, do you think,
I mean, not in the way we're talking right now with a sexual partner. I don't like that word. But that's part of my negotiating sex with people is...
Now, a peer of mine that's transgendered, now a female, she let me know that it is not her penis, it is her clitoris. So even though genitally it appears as a penis, to her it was a clitoris.
That can be different for different people.
Right.
Which is why if you are engaging in sexual contact with someone who is queer in terms of gender, you ask questions and you talk about, like, are there any words that are off limits? What words do you like to use for parts of your body?
Can you tell
and
me
I ask
more?
that of all of my partners at this point, whether I think they're queer or cis or whatever. I ask that of everyone.
You just said the word genderqueer. Can you explain that to me or describe it?
So that is basically anyone who isn't cis in gender. Cis
Okay.
meaning you identify as the gender you were assigned at birth.
And that's spelled C-I-S.
CIS.
And where are you in your life right now? Hearing about this very private journey of yours. You're at a stage in your life of saying, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to tell the world because there is no shame about it.
Yeah. So I've had legal name change. All my legal documents have been changed to non-binary for gender.
Isn't that great that you even have that option now?
It is very cool.
Hell yes.
Yeah, birth certificate even was amended to show that. I am out in my life full time. I am Autumn. Yes.
What about, I haven't
no
even
one
asked.
really even knows my dead name at this point. That's part of my life other than my
Oh,
siblings.
yeah. I'm glad you brought up dead name.
Dead name is the name that you were given basically at birth and would relate to the gender you were assigned at birth. For trans people or people who have changed their name, it is disrespectful to call someone by their dead name. So that's kind of what dead name is.
Now, your dead name is not Brian, yet if I use, let's pretend that it was, if I said to you, hey, Brian, what would that be like? Would that be
First, it'd be like immediate panic.
Okay.
Whenever I hear my dead name used by anyone else, there's this little bit of panic, even now, years later, just like, oh shit. And then it's like, no, that's not me. They're not talking about me, but like.
So I'm using the name Brian, so we're going to pretend that it is for now. Does your mother and brother call you Brian or Autumn?
My siblings call me Autumn. They have been awesome in this whole thing. My mother isn't quite as great with it.
Is she 50-50?
She's getting much better, but she also likes drinks, so it's
Okay,
with
well,
that comes,
if we're drinking, we're not
the
always
lack
thinking
of awareness.
straight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think she wants to, but just it doesn't always.
Click.
Yeah.
What was it like coming out to her as non-binary, femicenter, omnisexual? Or I don't know what you have even disclosed to her. This is
So,
private to you.
The way that I came out to my siblings, I did my siblings first. That felt safer. And then to my mom. My father's passed away at this point. I started with my sexual orientation. I figured that's open the door with that.
If you have two hard things to do, that's the less hard thing.
Yes. And if they freak out about that, we're not going further. Like
It's testing ground.
Exactly. But that was how I approached it at first.
Did you think that your mom already guessed maybe my child is bi?
I don't know that she ever necessarily questioned the sexuality, but she had caught me with feminine clothes on in the past and punished me for it.
Oh, really? So in high school or younger, you were punished? And that reiterates the shame piece.
Exactly.
Not only is something wrong with me, it's wrong to the point of I'm getting a negative consequence.
Right. And so probably shouldn't have been a huge surprise, but I was surprised by her reaction. She said that she loved me and just wants me to be happy, however that is for me. I was
so
really
glad.
surprised by that.
Yes. Not enough parents are able to get into the empathetic heart space to be there for their children. So that was a mom bonus.
Yeah, that was actually, I felt really blessed on how my family reacted because that's not always the case for people. I was really lucky there. So the sexual orientation and gender happened in the same conversation.
Okay. What I'm hearing is you felt safe enough to then say, all right, you rocked that one. Here's another one.
So after my brother and sister, after I'd done it a couple times, it was like, kind of let's just do this. I just kind of kept talking. I didn't like pause for a reaction or anything. I just kept talking and rolled into the gender orientation too. Yeah, so it was...
She continued with that message, I want you happy, I love you?
She did.
Yes.
Even though she didn't use the right pronouns or name, and still doesn't sometimes.
It's changing the brain, rerouting what has been programmed into you with the pronouns. For her, it just becomes like second nature, and she's got to do that pause to make sure that she's reflecting who you are today.
And I get it's got to be some type of challenge to have your child, in a way, what can feel like reject what you called them and how you raised them.
Like, this is my son, you're still my son.
Right.
Versus now, this is my daughter.
And so what I say is child because of the non-binary, so
yes.
Child.
I am so glad that you brought me to that because, again, that's my old programming that made the two choices of son or daughter.
Exactly. That's that binary headspace.
Yeah. And I went there because of your name being Autumn.
Right. At this point, I get gendered all over the place.
Yeah.
and I don't often correct people. I mean, if it's people who are actually in my life and I'm going to be interacting with, like, I'll correct.
So is most of that gendering she with the name Autumn?
A lot of the times it is, yes. Which I would prefer to masculine gendering.
Now, living in the South, when I moved down there from the Midwest, it was miss, ma'am, even at fast foods. It was thank you, miss, thank you, ma'am, thank you, sir. Have you noticed that with the general population in restaurants or grocery stores when people tend to do a greeting or a thank you?
I have noticed that sometimes. I don't know. At this point, it's just kind of like, it is what it is. I don't really get offended by stuff like that.
So your perception doesn't mean that's who I am.
Correct. And even at times, it's fun to just see people trying to do the mental gymnastics of figuring out who I am, but just by looking at me.
So we're talking about non-binary, trans, pronouns, and grocery stores.
Yes.
My son and I who is now 20, but he was maybe 4, we'll say, and we're in line at the grocery store, and he said, "Is that a boy or a girl?" And I said, "Oh, I am certain human."
Yes.
Now, boy,
which
girl.
Which is the perfect answer.
It's human, hun.
Yes.
They're human.
Yes.
So when I said it's, I was thinking pronoun. Sorry.
Right.
It's human. God, I didn't mean to dehumanize that person.
Right.
They are human.
Which is funny, calling someone human at the same time dehumanizing them.
To me, I wanted just 4-year-old that's wanting to categorize, because that's what our society naturally does. When I was saying human, I'm wanting to value, that's a person that we don't need to put into a box. But I'm not going into that detail, with the 4-year-old, just making it normative. That's another human. We're in line with a bunch of humans. Yes. Sometimes now we could maybe be in line with a service dog, but other than that, it's all humans in that grocery store.
Yes.
Let's go to where you are right now.
Yes.
And right now, you have a partner with you in the room.
I do. You want to say hi, Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Hello.
And how long have you and Ken been dating?
We have been dating just over a year. And I guess I'll talk about where I am as a relationship style, too. So we are both polyamorous.
So what does that mean for you? Because to me, poly is this huge word. It's like an umbrella.
It definitely can be. And anybody who is poly, you almost need to ask them, and what does that mean to you? How do you poly?
Right.
Because there's so many different ways to do it.
How do you poly?
Yes, that's my normal question when I talk to somebody.
So Autumn, how do you poly?
I am solo poly, means that my primary relationship is with myself. So I view that as my primary and try and take care of myself first.
So my commitment is to me.
Correct.
And my self-care.
Yes.
And really working hard not to give over our sense of self within a relationship.
Yes.
I was talking about with you earlier about sometimes we have that tendency to give over the self even without knowing it for the partner.
Right. Sometimes I'm better at that than others.
Okay.
But that is what I strive for.
Solo poly is really work to prioritize the relationship with myself. How is that different than being selfish, though? Let me just say, I'm saying that to I believe that listeners, actually what I was thinking about was my family. I thought that they would be like, oh, so you're putting yourself first. Isn't that selfish? So again, that's where my line of thinking is that I believe that would be a comment from my family. And actually not even a non-judgmental way, but just not the selfish piece.
Well, the way I view it is, if you don't love yourself and take care of yourself first, how can you possibly take care of others or love others? Like, if you take care of yourself first, then you can give so much more.
That's the word that I was just thinking. Then our ability to give, without some level. Again, people will say you can't be in a relationship unless you love yourself. Some of us would be single throughout our whole life. That's a process.
Yes.
You could also be an emotional vampire of I can't take care of myself because you have to do that.
Yes.
And that might have been the dynamic that you had with your wife without the sense of self. It was us.
Yeah, we were one person.
Instead of me, you, and we, it was the definition of we.
Yes, it was us. And now I have this well-defined sense of self, and then seek out...
Which I love that well-defined sense of self.
Aw. Then I seek relationships with other people who I feel connections with. Right now, I have one partner here, Ken, who I would say is my primary partner in terms of outside partners. I'm not terribly big on hierarchical poly, but it's just kind of how it has played out.
Listeners might even be confused with primary, because in the community we use primary, secondary, relationship anarchy.
Solo poly, also kitchen table polyamory, which is kind of everybody in the poly family can all share meals together and are all cool with one another and hanging out with one another.
Even if they have different dynamics with the different people within more of the family view.
Yes, and so some of those may just be friends and might not be in a sexual or romantic relationship with each other.
When you talk about how you define solo poly, that really aligns with where I am in my life. And having had 2 very serious love relationships, I'm looking at prioritizing me checking in with what might be selfish or self-centered, as long as that is to the side and it's about health and really giving others my genuine self versus the self that I hope that they love or want. That sounds like I would align with that as well.
I think it's, at least to me, feels just so natural and a very easy place to come from. Felt right real intuitively.
And you and Ken, you met at a venue, is that correct? Did you meet online? Did you meet with friends?
We did meet at a venue.
You met at an event within the kink LGBTQ community?
We did, yeah. Ken actually approached me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Did you give Autumn a flirt?
Kind of. Had a very strong, energetic connection when we started, just took off from there.
And
it's been quite the adventure.
You identify as non-binary.
I identify as agender.
Agender?
Yes.
Oh, God, that's a whole other discussion. Can you state what your assigned gender at birth?
Yes, I'm AFAB, assigned female at birth. I've never had dysphoria with feminine presence.
Can you say what dysphoria is?
So dysphoria is the feeling that people get when they see whatever genitals, it could be whatever. I'm going to just use genitals as an example. You are not, that does not connect with you as a person, and so you are then feel dysphoric towards that. You don't want that to be there. It's not.
That's not a part of who I am.
Yes.
So it's kind of like anxiety, discomfort with what you're seeing, and just really not happy with what you see. You just can't relate with what you're seeing. It doesn't feel like you.
If we look at that SOGIE model, how would you describe yourself?
I'm pansexual and panromantic. I am agender, and then I am feminine presenting. I have very little mask in my self-expression. It does come out sometimes, but not much. So.
And when did you realize, you know what, the female assigned at birth doesn't really feel like my natural state?
So I was in college. I had an English class. It was the basic English. I only went to college for a year. And
so here you are, a freshman.
Right,
and we're all struggling as freshmen.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I could do a paper on anything. And I did a paper on gender because I started realizing that for me, gender is a man-made thing that we didn't have to make up, and we did anyway to put things in boxes, which in general, it's natural to want to box things up because it makes it organized. It makes
labels
it harder.
Help us understand.
Yes, but as time progressed, obviously, like that's not,
And there's scientific differences.
Yes.
In the XX and XY chromosome. So the labels are important medically to understand our body's response and our hormones and going to the gynecologist.
I soon started looking into gender and how it's not that I have any dysphoria with how I present and that I am assigned female at birth. I don't want to attach myself with gender in general because I do not like stereotypes. I have always been stereotyped as a girl, girls can't carry heavy things. Like I've always had the natural stereotypes.
Kind of the girly girl approach.
Yes.
Ken is a girly girl.
Yes, and so that's why throughout my journey, because I originally was non-binary. Non-binary is you are on the spectrum of gender. And so then I had to realize, well, I'm not even on the spectrum of gender. I think gender is stupid. I am agender. I have no gender.
And you're feeling comfortable with having a physical form of breast and a vulva?
Yes, I don't mind it at all. I've never been uncomfortable with my presentation. I've gotten gender euphoria before. I was working and I would, work on the phone as customer service and someone kept on saying, oh bro. And that was like a really affirming thing for me because I was like, well, thanks. I know you don't know me, but thanks for not having that stereotype of my voice saying that I am Miss. That's kind of where I am at the moment.
And what about your sexual orientation? You
So-
labeled yourself as pan. And how long have you been able to identify that? Or we mentioned that feminine box.
Yeah.
Now looking at the box of being a heterosexual,
So-
as is assumed by our society.
I've always been a very open person, and this is something that I've never really liked boxes at all in my entire life. When I grew up, I was traditionally attracted to cis males, still am pretty much. Aside from a couple of interactions and sexual encounters, I haven't really had a girlfriend or someone with a vulva as my partner per se.
About your identification as a pansexual
Yes.
orientation. When did you notice that?
I noticed that really in high school, and I soon after going through the gender, space, I have just been that type of person that like I am much more attracted to personality than physical body, and I think that matches with the fact that I don't like gender, so I naturally am not going to put myself in a identification that I like a certain gender.
So I'm attracted to an adult human that is caring and respectful.
Yeah.
And kind of matches personality wise.
Yeah.
Are your parents aware?
Yes, I did fully come out to my dad as a gender. I think the last time I saw him when I was younger, at first thought I was bi, and I had a situation where I posted something on Snapchat, me in my bathing suit, and my dad took away my phone for an entire year because of that.
A year?
Yes, very strict.
That
very
was a
strict.
strong response,
And
Daddy.
he looked through every single my footprint on the web. He looked
Your
through
privacy
all of
was
that.
really violated.
Yes, and I had to forcefully come out to him as bi at that time because he was going to look through my stuff anyway.
Were you flirting with any identified females?
Yes, I had someone, there was this app for LGBTQ plus a community. I had someone that I really had a crush on, and she was from another state. We obviously would never be
You
able
thought,
to link
my dad's going to see that.
Yes.
So let me just lay it on the table.
And so, yeah, I did that. And then when I came out to him as agender, I didn't think he was going to be
How old were you?
understanding. This was within the year. I guess
Within this past year?
Yes.
How old were you when your dad saw the swimsuit photo?
I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay, so 15?
Yep. My dad's girlfriend right now has kids that are non-binary. That was my stepping stone of like, okay, cool. He has someone that he loves. Okay, cool. This is good. He's understanding it. I'm assuming
So he's
she's
using
told
they,
him-
them pronouns or pronoun different than the person was assigned at birth?
Yes. And so that was naturally, I wanted to get that out there and kind of just balls deep and be like, hey, I'm this, and if you want to...
I think it's important for us to kind of look at that time frame. So you were 15, and the stupid bathing suit thing came out, and he really overreacted.
Yes.
And within the past year, you're kind of like, hey, Dad, this is kind of who I am. And what
Yes.
is your age now, Ken?
I'm 23.
So here we have examples of two humans with very different life experiences
Yes.
and time frames in which you were both able to identify your SOGIE.
And I love the difference that we share. We have an age gap. Absolutely love it, because the things never get boring. I love it. It's great.
Is there any recommended resources? I'm going to list some resources in this podcast that were influential to you. So you did mention NA and therapy and the effectiveness of EMDR and internal family systems in helping you in your healing journey. Anything in relation to the SOGIE of the sexual orientation and gender identity?
Yes, so affirmations, the LGBTQ community center was huge for me. That was actually in the next county over. Wish it was closer.
Detroit area in Michigan. Affirmations was really influential
So
to you.
affirmations is in a different county, actually, in Ferndale.
But it's still within the Detroit area.
it
Like
is
it's a
within the
Detroit,
Detroit
suburb.
area,
It's
yes.
just not Wayne County.
Detroit, there's Ruth Ellis, which is typically for younger up to, I believe, the age 26. By the time I was coming to terms with all of my stuff, I was over that. That wasn't a good fit for me personally. So any type of like LGBTQ community center, somewhere where you can find like-minded people and accepting people is huge. There's so many online resources. Scarletine is one that I really like for sexual education. I found my yes, no, maybe inventory that I use from there in relation to sexual contact with people. I really like their version. You can also seek out the Trans Life Support does have a website with a resource guide on there, all kinds of trans and LGBTQ friendly resources, and at translifesupport.org.
I want to give you, as I mentioned before, a huge thank you for sharing so much of your journey. Hopefully it influences people that have had some similar experience to you to know that there is life, that there is happiness, that there is an ability to be in your physical body and to feel like you, to be in your sexual space and realize that you can be you without the boxes, without the labels, and meeting like-minded people that accept the authentic you. So Autumn, I love you.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love you too. This was fun.
As I mentioned, I'm going to give just a couple of more resources, and that is the trevorproject.org, glad.org, and that's GLAAD.org. And if you do the /resource list, / they have excellent information. The music for Tiffany Turned On is provided by Kumasi Afrobeat. You can find them online at KUMASIAFROBEAT.com. They are New Orleans' full Afrobeat band. They play to make you move. If you enjoyed today's episode, click, follow, like, give me a review. Did you know that books or items that I recommend in the podcast can be found on my website? Check me out. Watch my TEDx talk titled I Love Pleasure. It is all at NewOrleansSexTherapy.com. Get turned on to life and in your bedroom.